Right then, what's all this about? Ooh. I know where these are from. Today's video is sponsored by Steamforged Games. Steamforged Games are a miniatures games company hailing from Manchester, England. Not only do they produce a range of incredible D&D 5e compatible modules that are crammed with excellent miniatures, but they're also the company responsible for turning some of your favourite video games and TV shows into miniatures based board games. To find out more about Steamforged, including details of Resident Evil the board game, head to the referral link in the description below. So yes, today's video is sponsored by the wonderful Steamforged and their Resident Evil board game that's just hit Kickstarter on the final day of me recording this. And that gives me a perfect excuse to cook together some fun tips for painting horror-themed miniatures. And since it's pretty close to Halloween as well, it seems like good timing. Using these wonderful miniatures from the Resident Evil game, I'm going to show you some super simple, beginner-friendly tips for some ghoulish horror effects. We'll be going over two methods for painting blood effects, both dried blood that's soaked into clothing and fresh blood including spatter. I'll show you my favourite quick and easy workup for dead necrotic skin. And finally, I'll show you how to add dirty, weathered and worn looks to clothing and boots. And all of these will be tied together by pretty much one unified theme. So let's get stuck in, and let's get spooky. So first of all, I want to show you a method to create dried, soaked in blood. Something that's going to be prevalent on probably most of your Resident Evil miniatures if you're working your way through this board game. I want to start out by mixing two heavy washes from matte paints. We'll go for a deep red-black and a slightly brighter red, more toward a medium. I'm going to use Vallejo model colour here, but any matte brand will do. I'm also mixing these washes with just paint and water. No additional additives are needed for these techniques. To apply these to my model, I've first completely finished painting the clothes as I normally would. And I'm just going to start off by using the darker colour to spread the blood stain out where I think it should go. From here I can now build up a couple of coats of this heavy wash until I get a nice intense red-black bloodstain that doesn't have a hard edge on it like it would have if you used full thickness paint. Now I just need to repeat this process with the brighter colour, stepping in a little and focusing the brighter colour more towards the centre of the shape. While I'm doing this, my brush strokes are also trying to mostly travel towards the area that I want more intense with colour. This is very similar, you may have noticed, to the technique that we use for glazing. The only difference really is that we're using a heavier, less diluted paint. Once that's all dry, if I want to level that colour out at all, I can also thin my darker paint even more to an actual glaze now, and just thinly filter it over to take that colour back down. And with those steps complete, we have some awesome dried bloodstains, and we can use the balance of brightness and darkness to choose how fresh we want these to look. However, when it comes to really fresh wet blood and spatter, we need to take a different approach. There tend to be two areas where I think we often trip up with this, so let me first of all explain those to you. The first one is the product itself. There's a lot of pre-made products out there for this, but universally they're often extremely thick, making them hard to handle for doing finer work. With this in mind, I prefer to mix something myself. You probably have something like inks or contrast paints at hand, so grab a few of those and make a bloody colour. Then just throw in some gloss varnish to make it dry nice and shiny. This will give you a beautiful paint that isn't too thick for you to be able to do finer work with. The other problem is specifically related to how we apply spatter. We're often told to literally spatter it with a toothbrush, a flat brush or something similar. The issue this can have is that when we hold a mini beside this for scale, we can see that not only do the spatter droplets vary greatly in size, but the largest ones are completely the wrong scale. With this in mind, I like to manually paint my spatter using my homemade mix and just a gentle dotting and trailing sort of motion. With a nice fine tipped brush, I find this works perfectly for getting me a spatter pattern that's more to scale and looks great when it's finished. Thanks to this being nice and thin, we can also use it to run blood trails down things too. Right, and now we've mastered blood in all its myriad forms. Let's move on to something a little bit more technical. If we look at how zombies are typically portrayed on, say, TV shows, we see that the skin tones used are normally very pale and often will lean in a sort of purple or a greeny direction, something like that. It's also interesting to note that as well as that green or purple tinge that we'll often see, there tends to be a lot of pinkness around the eyes as well. We can actually simulate all of this really quickly and easily and get a very varied skin, just using a few more simple homemade washes and a pale base skin. So let's begin by figuring out that skin tone. I don't want to lose all the warmth here from my ice yellow, so I'm actually going to start out with ice yellow but spike it with a little bit of purple to cool it down a touch and head toward the look we want. Remember, we're going to be layering washes over this too, so we actually want it to be too bright, if anything, so that it can come down in tone as we layer more on top of it. Once we have this mixed, we can get it laid all over the zombie skin areas in just a couple of thin coats, and then leave it to completely dry. So now comes that fun part again where we're going to mix some more homemade washes, again just using paint and water, by using purple, brown, green and pink washes. Remember with these, we want them thin but not glaze thin. They shouldn't look fully transparent when we lay them down, but they should be thin enough to run into cracks and crevices. From here it's playtime next. Our darkest purple and brown washes can be used to give us shadows and depth. So we should mostly focus those on recesses and areas where we don't want much light to be present. Then we can use our lighter green and pink tones, mainly focusing around eyes, cheeks, mouths, extremities, to create some lovely sickly tones. Although with that green you may also just fancy an all over wash, which is definitely still going to work great. And once all those homemade washes are dried on the miniature, we can still re-highlight if we wish, just by using the base skin tone. Because we've already darkened it down with so many washes, it now acts as a highlight tone for itself. And the finished end result, as you can see, is a great looking undead skin that's very easy. There's no difficult painting to do here. Also remember that this method will absolutely work brilliantly for darker tones as well. You'll just want to ramp up the saturation on the staining to keep it visible over a darker base. And so with that one down, we can finally progress on to the last technique we're going to cover today. So you're probably starting to notice that secret theme I told you about, where all of these recipes are involving runny paints, and that's going to continue here as well, because the power of thinning paint truly does give us some amazing effects. For this next one, we're mixing a rusty orange and a warm light brown, both down to that same wash-like consistency. Once again, we don't want complete transparency, but we do want the paint thin enough that it will flow into cracks if we put it there. To use these paints, the brown is for our lighter colours, where we'll apply it to cracks or use it to make little stains wherever we feel they should live. The orange, on the other hand, we use for our darker colours, where the dark value showing through will turn it a similar dirty, dusty, muddy kind of colour. Again, I can't stress enough, to get these effects to work, it's really important that we select matte finish paints. So I tend to lean towards Vallejo Model Colour and Reaper Master Series paints, but any other brands that have a matte finish will also work for these techniques really well. So once these simple washes dry, we should find that the cloves take on a wonderful weathered look. For an extra final bit of spice if you wanted to, you could also take a black wash that's super thin, and you could use that to make tide marks and sweat stains and that kind of thing as well. There really are a ton of ways that you can apply this technique. And with all of these techniques combined together for the blood, the skin and the various different stainings, I think you might just manage to survive getting all of your Resident Evil miniatures together. But that said, just to make sure that you're infected with as much enthusiasm for this game as I am, here's one last look at all of our completed miniatures together. I had great fun with these. They've got me really excited for the release of the board game, and you can guarantee that I'm going to be there on Kickstarter too, backing this one. But if you want to join me and you fancy a copy of this game for yourself, there will be a referral link in the description below, so you'll be able to support the channel whilst you pick up your copy of Resident Evil, and I'd really appreciate that. So until next time, friends, stay spooky, have a wonderful Halloween, and don't forget to drop a comment below to let me know what you think of Resident Evil the board game. I'm sure Steamforged Games will be checking the comments on this video too, so it'll be a great place that you can feedback to them what you think about it. All that remains is to wish you happy hobbying. I will see you in the next one, folks. So thanks for watching, and bye bye for now.